This is TWiT.
All right, so we talked, I think it was last week, we talked about the story. I think maybe hard to know the truth of it. New York Times had a story about a foundation that Eric Schmidt had given a lot of money to, Google had given a lot of money to. The foundation created a report that criticized, that actually supported the EU's anti-monopoly claims against Google. At some point, for reasons unknown, the foundation decided to sever its ties with the guy who created that report and his group. And now, and this is the article, I criticized Google, it got me fired, here's how corporate power works. Kashmir Hill, a little bit of a pile-on, tells a story that, frankly, is even a little more scary in her Gizmodo article. Yes, Google uses its power to quash ideas it doesn't like. I know, because it happened to me. So this is kind of following on the heels of the New America Foundation story. She wrote a story. She was working for Forbes. She says, I was new at my job. I ran social media. So because I was not only a reporter but ran social media, I got pulled into a meeting with the Google salespeople about Google+. This is when it was just starting out. The salespeople were trying to get Forbes to add a +1 button. You know, there's a Facebook like button and there's a +1 button to their articles alongside the Facebook like and the Reddit share button. They said you had to do this. It's important to do because the plus recommendations would be a factor in search results, a crucial source of traffic to publishers. So she's wearing two hats. Maybe this is part of the problem. She said, this sounded like a news story to me, that in fact Google was saying your search results will be better if you use our +1 button, which is a news story, right? So she asked the Google people, did I hear correctly? If a publisher doesn't put a +1 on the page, search results would suffer. The salespeople in the meeting said yes, but they're salespeople.
Right.
So she did the right thing. She went to public relations. She said, I'm a reporter. Here's what I heard in a meeting. Did I understand correctly? The press office confirmed it. They preferred to say the plus button, quote, influences the ranking, but they did not deny what the salespeople told me. If you don't feature the +1 button, your stories will be harder to find on Google. So she published a story. Stick Google Plus buttons on your pages or your search traffic suffers. She got called on the carpet. Her boss said, wait a minute, that was an NDA'd meeting. You're not allowed to write about it.
Her boss at Forbes? Or her boss?
Google flipped out. This was in 2011. They didn't challenge the accuracy of the reporting, but they called and said you have to unpublish the story because the meeting was confidential. And the information discussed there had been subject to a non-disclosure. She hadn't signed the meeting, the NDA. She hadn't been told the meeting was confidential, and she, at the meeting, said, I'm a reporter.
Yeah.
She said, I was told, and this is the point you were asking, I was told by my higher-ups at Forbes that Google representatives called them saying the article was problematic and had to come down. It might have consequences for Forbes. She said, I thought it was an important story, but I didn't want to cause problems for Forbes. And I think, by the way, her boss is coming to her is, in effect, putting pressure on her, whether they said take it down or not. Yeah. That's putting pressure. It's going to hurt us. So given that I'd gone to the PR team and it was already out in the world, I felt it made more sense to keep the story up. But after continued pressure from my bosses, I took the piece down. Kashmir Hill, who's very respected, said, a decision I will always regret. Forbes declined comment about this, I presume, currently when she contacted them. But the most disturbing part of the experience, what came next? That story disappeared from Google's search results. You couldn't find that story. If you search for it today, you won't find it.
Well, did the story come down?
The story came down, but more importantly, Google scrubbed the search results.
Well, why wouldn't they scrub the search results if there's
no. You should still have a reference to that, even if the story isn't there anymore, right?
Well, not a page that doesn't exist. Now, you might have reference about discussions about it.
The article goes on to say it had been mirrored on other sites, and it wasn't found there either.
It was. She says it was unusual websites captured by Google's crawler did not tend to vanish that quickly. And then, so deliberate. She felt that was evidence that they had. I don't know if it's probative or not, but that was evidence that Google manipulated search results to eliminate references to a story they didn't like. To me, that's not so much the issue as Google saying, take that story down.
Well, and part of the question also, I mean, if she was at a meeting, it should have been clear one way or the other if she was under a non-disclosure. I mean, by the way, I will disclose right now, Google supports my nonprofit, and I write for Forbes, so I'm in a funny position on this one. And so I go into meetings all the time with Google under NDA, but I always make it very clear.
Right.
Am I under NDA? And if I am, I am. If I'm not,
this is
I'm
always
not.
challenging. In fact, I refuse to sign NDAs or embargoes or of any kind partly because I have a leaky memory.
Yeah.
And I'm talking all the
hard,
time.
I remember.
So I prefer not to be encumbered by that. But if I went to a meeting unwittingly that there was an NDA on and then was asked to not report it,
if you didn't,
that would be a problem.
If they didn't tell you it was an NDA, I mean, especially a sales meeting, I assume that anything in a
well,
sales
that's
call,
also why I try not to go to sales meetings, right? You're right. Anything they say at a sales call is to the aim of selling something.
I think
the NDA is not the big issue here. You got to unpack the issue. So there's the issue of whether or not it's a good thing or not, or legal or not. If it's literally true that adding the +1 button, that not adding it would hurt your search results, right? There's the actual facts of the story and whether or not that's problematic. And I'm not sure whether it is or not.
Yeah.
Then there's this sort of general nonsense about NDAs, which if you go to a meeting at almost any of these companies' offices, you're signing NDA just to get in the building. Like most of those sign-in things are NDAs.
As a journalist, so that's meaningless.
It's all meaningless. Yeah. NDAs in general are bullshit. Yeah. But the story is like, is it okay for Google, which is a private company, to say, hey, we're rolling out this product and using it is going to help your search results? There's a second piece, which is it okay for a reporter to write that in the negative? There's a third piece, which is it okay for her to be pressured to remove it? I mean, these are all, those are all the topics. The NDA is like the least interesting part of this for me.
Yeah. Well, the only part that I find interesting is whether or not this discrepancy, whether she thought she was under NDA wasn't. Well, but you're right. I mean, these other issues are just as troublesome.
She did get a communication. This was added to the article after the fact from Google's Vice President of Global Communications, Rob Shilkin, who said very clearly we had nothing to do with removing the article from the cache. That did not happen, and there's no evidence that did happen. Just anecdotal reporting that it might have happened. And I thought he wrote a good article. He said, from our perspective, a good note to Kashmir, in which he said, we've enjoyed working respectfully with you and are sad to hear you've carried this since 2011, which I think is a good way to start. From our perspective, this was a disagreement over whether the meeting was held under non-disclosure. We thought you had been told that. Had we known you hadn't been told that, we would, of course, have mentioned that because, like most of our client meetings that discuss new features, this is a non-disclosure. We don't want reporters to hear this. This is a client meeting.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Your editor agreed. He told our PR rep the article is being removed because it involved reporting on an NDA meeting. He says, as for the Google cache, it's easy for a website owner to request the cache be cleared. It's very possible that the editor merely put in a request. It's automated, by the way, on the Google tools, Webmaster Tools. But he said, we had nothing to do with removing it. Maybe your editor did. And so this was actually a very conciliatory letter from Rob. I have to say, just like the previous story from the New York Times, there's no smoking gun. It's very much circumstantial that something might have happened.